Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opus WealthStyle Podcast. My name is Ivan Watanabe, here with my wonderful partner, Evan Wall. Evan, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing great. Getting ready for Thanksgiving break coming up in a few days, and just happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. I love Thanksgiving.
It's the best.
Yeah, for sure.
Just relaxation, family, too much food.
That's it. What's better than that? That's
Football.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to have on a wonderful guest. We went to college together, Christine O'Hara Ryan. Christine, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. Good to see you.
Excellent. So happy to have you on. I'll let Christine introduce herself, but very excited to have a conversation with a total badass. Very excited to have you on and talk a little bit about your experience with Moab 240 and kind of how you're balancing that with all the other things in life. So super excited to have you on, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here.
Very cool.
I'm happy to introduce myself too, if you want.
Please do.
Yeah. So I'm Christine. I'm a senior sales leader in the healthcare space. I work for Charlie Health right now. I'm a mom of 2 young kids. And this past year, I completed the Moab 240. Don't know if too many people, and we'll get into it today, know what that is or how big that is. But it's a 240-mile ultra run through the Utah desert. So it took about 5 days, nonstop through storms. Yeah, storms, sleep deprivation. We'll get into all of that and some of the hardest moments of my life, I would say. But for me, it wasn't, about being the fastest. It was really proving that focus, discipline, and the right team can really, really get you through some big moments.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be here and talk more about it.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. I mean, I was inspired by your social media posts and just kind of like all of the. I mean, just visually, you could see how grueling it was, and thinking about what it must have been like to train for that, to have a family, to have a career, and sort of really got me thinking of just having you on to kind of tell us a little bit about that plan and the journey and kind of how it was for that. So maybe just start like what inspired you to even do Moab 240? Like, take us from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning. I started my ultra journey probably about 10 years ago, and you dip your toe into just races, and I don't want to say just basic races, but we can start even from, let's say, a half marathon, and that built up to marathons, to triathlons, to Ironmans ultimately, which really got me into that distance passion. And from there was the ultra running. And so, Moab for me has been something probably for the past 5 years, 6 years, that has just been on my heart, something I've wanted to do. And I learned about it through the ultra community. And so by doing the ultra runs, there's other 200+ mile races, but really it's this continuous build upon of what more mentally, physically can I handle and do. So really the journey to Moab was, yes, there's other 200-mile races out there. Yes, you're building upon different types of races to test your physical and mental limits. But there was always something about Moab that called to me. It is considered, if not the hardest, one of the hardest ultra marathons. There's a lot of spiritual components to it too, which I know we'll probably get into a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it like, what was it truly like when you kind of like dig down deep? Was it just to test yourself and see like how far you could go and where your limits are, or was there something underlies that you're trying to prove to yourself or your kids, or any other deeper mission?
Yeah. I think probably the answer is yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really multifaceted. It's not just this one answer to it. I think, you don't have to do a 240-mile race to sometimes get some of the answers or reaffirm things we already know about ourselves. I think there is something about this, though, when you think of, for me, leadership is a big piece in what I do. My children are huge, right? And part of what I do, and for them to see that, I think is something that will be with them for a while. And it's also, Moab isn't standalone. I'm very aware that there's going to be this before and after Moab piece of my life now. But I think there is like I say, there's a spiritual component too. And for me, I always had a passion with mountains, the desert, kind of really athletics have always been part of my life. I played college ice hockey. There's always been some physical and mental component of my life that has transcended into, relationships, leadership, my career, and of course, my kids.
Can you just explain a little bit about like what Moab 240 is? So we talked about running through the mountains. I get that it's 240 miles, just kind of take the audience through a little bit of the actual event itself.
Yeah. So Moab 240, it usually takes place in October every year in Moab, Utah, and it is 240 miles. It's a loop. There's about 250-ish runners that sign up. They keep it pretty limited. There's a lottery to get into it. So thousands of people enter this lottery through all over the world. And about 250 or so are accepted and toe the line. So they come from all over the world. And you have, David Goggins was there for those who were familiar with him. I believe this was his second time doing Moab. So you have a lot of big people in this endurance ultra community who kind of do these types of races. But it's through the desert and it's through mountains. So you essentially ascend almost Mount Everest amount of feet in elevation. I sometimes like to think of it for us. It's like the distance, just to put in perspective, it's like maybe from New York City to Washington, D.C. approximately, but fill it in with the desert and mountains. And then this year was unique because typically you train for heat, right? Because you're in the desert. So you have the cold nights in a desert, but it's pretty hot during the day. And that is traditionally what Moab is. And I believe it was 2017 or 2018. It's still a fairly new ultra when it first launched. But this year, there wasn't any of that. It was really brutal storms and freezing temperatures, hail, lightning, and we can get into some of that. But so when you take that for Moab 240, already considered one of the hardest ultras in the world, and then you put that weather component on top of it, even the founders said, it was probably the hardest Moab that they've ever had so far.
Unbelievable. And you said it took how long for you to cross it?
5 days, so about 117 hours.
With no sleeping, no like stopping for sleep at any point?
Yeah, so it's a constant movement forward of 117 hours. And so you can, depending on your time, right? And depending on how you're doing, you can build in the chunks of sleep. I probably had less than 4 hours over the course of time of sleep. Yeah.
I don't even know how to, I'm not sure. My brain doesn't compete, doesn't understand that. 4 hours of sleep over a 5-day period and you're running for 240 miles.
Freezing hailstorms.
Yeah, I'm really I'm challenged with trying to understand that. Tell us a little bit about the team and kind of how that got organized and the folks that kind of helped you accomplish this.
Yeah, it is really hard to wrap your head around. Like I can even say that it's hard for me to wrap my head around, and I did it, right? And when you have elements like that, you have almost, I think it was 40% of the people didn't finish, right? And these are really trained athletes. Wow. I remember just showing up, to the start line. We're doing the race, kind of rundown with everyone outdoors, under a tent. And, they say there's some rain in the forecast. We know it's there, but the mountains kind of have weather patterns of their own, a mind of its own. So everything could change, right? So we were all positive, aware of the race reports, that positive kind of going into it. But I remember looking around at everyone. We were going through that briefing, like these are the most fit people probably I'll ever be in an area with. But 40% didn't finish.
That's
and a lot
incredible.
of that had to do with the weather elements this year. So for me, you asked about team, like it all goes back to a lot of that. And so I had a crew captain. So a lot of people have crew. They can only go to certain spots. So Moab, they really try to protect the land. So there's aid stations, but your crew can only go to certain ones. They can only access certain points. So I only saw my crew a handful of times throughout this race. The first 67, 68 miles, I got a pacer at mile 68. So I was kind of alone with other runners up until that point. And there were maybe 2 or 3 aid stations between then. So, it was a really long time. But then the team is comprised of your crew, right? So I have a crew captain. She's been one of my best friends of 20 years. She's crewed a couple of my other ultra races. She's great at it. She even helps other runners when they do their ultras. So Claire was my crew captain. Really critical. So even, going into this race, there was a lot of planning, and we can talk a little bit about that just ahead of time. And then finding those pacers, right? That right fit for you and your personality. You don't know what you're going to experience. I've done 100 miles before, but I had no idea what would happen to me physically or mentally, or what I would face from a weather standpoint. And so those pacers were critical. So I had 3 pacers total. And then we had another, and then I had another best friend from Holy Cross who came out and helped be on the crew as well.
I want to know, like the depths of it. Like, how many times did you want to quit, And then how did you turn it around?
Yeah. This is interesting. And I think if you ask that question to different people, everyone will have a different answer. And some people will say multiple times, there was never a question in my mind I was going to quit. And I think a lot of it, it was 9 months of training. And when I looked at this race, it was almost like the reward after training for that long. It was probably 2 or 3 months more training for this versus the hundreds that I've done. But I think that, I was so excited and so at peace going into this that there was just not a question unless I got super hurt or just couldn't move, right? Or was physically pulled off that I wasn't going to finish. And I think that there wasn't a moment of quitting, but there were definitely some dark moments. There were some very scary times within the nights with that weather that were really scary and you questioned a lot of things. You questioned like, why am I doing this? Especially as a parent, right? And putting yourself in something like this, again, you don't know. And I'm happy to share a couple of those examples too.
Yeah.
On that journey.
Yeah. I mean, please, like, I'm curious, similar to Evan, like, how dark did it get? Yeah. To fill us, specifically for the parent piece, like that must have been,
sure.
That must have been difficult. And, I'm just, I'm curious, like what your mind went through.
Yeah. So the first night, again, we were aware of these weather reports, right? But we're optimistic. There was maybe some sprinkles. We didn't really experience a lot of heat. It was overcast, which was kind of a blessing. But then that first night, it rained 10 hours nonstop, and you're stuck in really, there's some technical terrain, mountains. There's a really big drop you have to go down and almost climb down. That was just wet and soaked, and the rocks aren't stable, so you're like slipping on the whole thing. And the rain, you're like, oh my goodness, this has to stop. The wind, there was also really bad wind that first night. And so some of the markers were getting blown away. The trails were being washed out. So you're just trudging kind of through mud and rivers essentially. And
were your feet and socks wet?
Soaked. So absolutely soaked. And I wasn't the next aid station where my shoes would be, where you could have a drop bag and where I was going to pick up my pacer wasn't until mile 68. And so from mile, 17, it was pretty dry. And then it really picked up. So for about 10 hours, it was just pouring rain that first night. It just did not let up. And, you find a buddy, right? As much as you can throughout that and stay positive. There were a lot of people who dropped after that. They've just experienced different things. And I didn't know that till after the race, but I kept going, right? So I was good. I was so happy when the rain stopped, but my feet, yes, were drenched. I was completely drenched. And then I think, so the first night, it was one of those things where I was like, well, it can't get worse than this. And then it did. You just are like, there's no way. 10 hours of nonstop rain, there's absolutely no way it can get worse than this. But it did. And so it let up a little bit till mile 68, met my pacer. We went to even the next aid station. It was nice. We could run a little bit. I changed my clothes, got some food, did a quick 30-minute nap. I did get my feet taped. So my feet got pretty messed up pretty early on then in the race. I think everyone's did. And you do think, gosh, I fell really far behind on my goal time. Like I had a coach for this race and we were pretty conservative with my time. But after that first night, and I wasn't the only one, right? We all fell behind kind of times we planned for.
There's a minimum requirement you have to hit, right?
There is, right, per aid station. And I really didn't worry about cutoffs until the very end. Yeah, the very end. We'll talk about that.
I was at a party over the weekend talking about you in preparation for this call, and the guy I was talking to actually turns out he ran 15 Ironmans.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it kind of caught me off guard. Like he looked incredibly fit, obviously.
Yes.
And so the third guy that we were with just like had no idea. And we were talking about you and the Moab 240, and I said the only reason I know about it is because of David Goggins, and he said that I don't know if it was this most recent one or some other race, but that his foot was broken, and he finished the race with a broken foot, and said if like he stopped, he would have obviously not continued to like stopped for rest or whatever. He would have not finished, and so he just ran for many miles on a broken foot, and it's just like, and the same thing was. And when I read his initial book or listened to the audiobook, he went through Navy SEAL training with 2 broken legs. Sorry for for ruining that for anyone that didn't listen to that book. But
Yeah.
it's like blows your mind, like what some of these people are capable of, and
Right.
including like how you could like just run for 10 hours with like soggy feet,
Yeah.
before all the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he experienced some stuff too on this race with his chest and everything. Like he had a lot going on.
Yeah. How is there anything during your training that sort of prepared you to feel that level of uncomfortability, and to continue to kind of train through it? I think like I'm not running outside if it's raining, period, let alone, like, let,
70
for something
degrees
like
and
that.
like a
And
little
so
drizzle.
just thinking about your level of training to get through that, is there anything that kind of prepared you for that? Or did you just kind of go in saying, we're just going to burn the boats. I'm finishing this thing no matter what, unless they, peel me off this race.
Yeah. Yes, I think training got really, really lonely. And you're out on trails and figuring out on your own for hours. You're in your head. And I think that, there's not like a big community I have out here that does these types
Hmm.
of races, right? And, as a parent, as someone who works, a pretty intense job, I think, you have only certain hours you can do it. So even to ask some people to join you even for 1 or 2 hours, it's just kind of really unrealistic. And so, for me, what prepared me was when I had to plan for this training around kids, work, travel, it's you're waking up when kids are sleeping. You're making it work for you. And so there were days where I had to catch a 7 a.m. train to the city, but I had a 3 hour run in my plan and it was pouring rain out. So I would just go circle the pavements of my neighborhood and run those hills in the pouring rain. There were times where, I had the kids and I had to run on the treadmill for 4 hours. And that's brutal for
Hmm.
anyone who has done that, or who has run the treadmill and just can imagine running on it for 4 hours. And then, yeah, there were times where you just make it work. And I think that was really, whether it's the hours, the elements, and that was 9 months of training of making it work. And I think a lot of that did help prepare me for then ultimately what we ended up facing. And I think a lot of life did. I think outside of the 9 months, I think we all have a lot of experiences we draw from when we go into these types of races that give us this strength that we probably always knew we had, but going through some of the things that we have in life, you really draw into these deep parts of you to pull through. And I think that was really, really something that came out during this race.
Yeah, I mean, listen, our previous conversation and just sort of doing like baseline level research on this, what's very obvious to me is your level of commitment to this, right? There are no excuses, and if you make any excuses, your training is off, and the level of training and the level of commitment that you need to have to be able to execute on this thing, is like unparalleled. Like there's no excuse. There's no like I'm gonna go run this thing, and I don't care how bad the weather gets. I'm gonna finish the race. And there's no excuse around that. The weather's poor outside. It's snowing outside. I still need to get my 4 miles in, whether I'm going to run on the treadmill and making it work for me. So it's very obvious that your level of commitment is unparalleled, and frankly, like is the only one of the only reasons why somebody could do something like this. How did you sort of arrive to that level of commitment? Because you need to make a decision that you want to do this, and then all of the other areas of your life get impacted by making this decision to execute on this thing. So how did you come to that? Like what made you want to do it?
That's right. It's absolutely true. I think there's an age of my kids, right? There's a piece of work where you kind of can have a little more control over schedule as you start to really develop a team of people. So I think there are a lot of elements when I look at previous years of why not Moab when I did want to do it 5 years ago, right?
How
There
old are
were
your
lots of
kids?
reasons. My youngest could be 7 this week.
That's great.
Happy
Yeah, I
birthday.
can hardly believe it. And my
Hmm.
oldest was soon to be 9.
Hmm.
So, self-sufficient, right? And so I think about, 5 years ago though, when I
Hmm.
really wanted to do this and I
Hmm.
really had to be patient with it because I knew mentally it required an element. I knew physically it did. And I think that it's not that all of those things fell into place when I entered the lottery in January. I didn't know I was going to get in. But I think that it was a moment where I knew I could figure it out. But there were a lot of no's. There's a lot of no's when you sign up for something like this. And that's where that nose for 9 months, right?
Hmm.
Home and
Did,
at work.
did you just get lucky on the lottery, or was there some reason that you got selected versus the other 750
No,
people that didn't? You just
no, it's
got,
just a
yeah.
lottery. So I have no idea.
And
Yeah.
how much do your kids know and understand of like the grueling nature of the race, like how long it is and how difficult it
Yeah.
is?
To an extent, I think my son was able to watch documentaries with me and sit down and
Okay.
kind of see this and again, they're short. Then they don't put together the whole context of a race like this,
Hmm.
but they got it. I talked about it. They saw me preparing and planning
Hmm.
and going to bed at certain times or going and running at certain times. But it was cute. Like their big thing was, Mom, you going to see a bear? Are you going to see a mountain lion? Are you going to see a snake?
I hope
You're going to
not.
be eaten by one?
Not gonna lie, I
Like
was
I
thinking the
hope
same
not.
thing in my mind when you were talking about running through the desert. I'm like, I'm curious if she like
Yeah.
ran into any animals, but
I didn't actually. Yeah, I didn't see any. I saw footprints, but yeah. And I think that, so I do. And I think that's where it goes back to, yes, they saw elements of the before Moab, but there's so much of this that are going to be lessons and things. And it's not, you know, that are going to come out of this, right? That influence their lives.
Hmm. Do they ever run with you or exercise with you?
Sometimes, yeah, they were
Yeah.
really involved in a lot of sports.
Yeah.
So they're pretty busy. Yeah.
Hockey?
Yes.
gotta be.
From Minnesota. So they're playing hockey. I played hockey in college. So my son plays, and then my daughter does soccer, dance, and ballet and gymnastics. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you talked a little bit about sort of building in the runs and the kids factor of it. Like, there seems to be this like concept out there of like work life balance, but um, for me it strikes so unrealistic, right? There is no work life balance in my mind. It's more of like trying to coordinate times when you're the best possible parent, the best possible employee, business owner, athlete. Like those things, you can't be, you know, there. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think that there's an equal proportion to all efforts in all of those things at all times, right? So, how did you kind of balance between those three kind of major components of your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to think about it, but I always say it comes down to just relentless focus and prioritization. And so it's no different than when you guys are planning for something, in business, or with a client or a big project. You really back into it. So I think of things like when I think of my team or we set strategies for things, we back into then how are we going to achieve it, right? Like what do we now need to do if it's 6 months out? What are
Hmm.
we doing, you know, each month, each week, right? Like what are those goals and what are we measuring ourselves by? It was very similar to this. It was a lot of planning. Right. So, with my coach, we would plan, a couple weeks ahead based on my work travel, based on kids' sports. Right. So there were reasons I did certain runs during the week because I wanted to be present at a hockey game on the weekend.
Hmm.
And that meant sleep had to sacrifice sometimes. Right. There's always sacrifices, but it is more of just, managing this type of life, but also a lot of it was the prioritization of things and
Yeah.
planning ahead.
Yeah, that relentless focus has to be key, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think just
Yes.
kind of being exactly wherever your feet are at that moment and trying to like just be
Yeah.
present for your runs or present when you're in the office. Try not to think about the runs. Try not to think about the kids if it's possible while you're, in the middle of, work. Yeah, I think that's,
Right.
um, yeah, that has to be the only way. I can't imagine some other way of
Right.
doing it.
Compartmentalizing all of it. Yeah. I mean, I think parents are really excellent at doing it. I think a lot of moms that I work with or who are on my team are really great at it. I think, yeah, like I said, I would do whatever my hours of running in a rain, catch a train, go in and lead meetings
Hmm.
and get back on, go cook dinner and go to a practice, right? So I think that, and that was a day. And it's not that I'm saying that's sustainable or should be done year after year after year, but I knew this was a time in my life. It was a moment in my life that this was going to be the reality. And I think a lot of it comes down to two, like nutrition, right? Like how you eat, I think is a huge piece of how you can keep going through some of that. When you can find those pockets of rest, it might not be literal sleep. And we know this as parents, it might not be actual sleep, but there are moments of restfulness, right? And I think finding those two, the nutrition and the moments of rest are really critical too.
This is just like a very detailed question I'm just curious about. When you're spending hours and hours running, do you listen to anything? Are you listening to like audiobooks, or are you just trying to like zen out? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do. I listen to music. I did when I
Do
was
you?
training. I didn't during the race though, interesting enough. And I don't know if it's because I had the pacer. We did play some music out loud. I did at a couple points play some music out loud on my phone because it was raining. I was scared to get the headphones out and everything. And then there's really no one around you at that point. Um, but during training, yeah, I listen to music quite a bit. Yeah.
How?
Yeah. But
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, we didn't even get into the worst night yet.
Yeah. Please explain.
Okay.
This is what we're here for.
I know. I was like, we should do the first one. Well, I mean, the nights we had another storm. So we had another really bad storm. It didn't last as long. So that second night we did have another one. And then, it kind of rained on and off. It was cloudy. It was so muddy, right? And at this point, I am starting to hallucinate a little bit, but the
Really?
sleep deprivation is catching up to me.
I would absolutely bet.
Yes.
So you were
Yes.
aware that you were hallucinating?
Not
Or was
necessarily.
it only in retrospect?
Not in the moment. Yeah, not in the moment. Yeah. Yeah. And some of it got kind of funny when I do look back on it, but I did, you would go through and you would see cartoons and like rocks. I think there was one point where I was so convinced that I saw, for people who are Catholic, like the Virgin Mary in a rock. And I was like, do you see it? Do you see it? I was actually showing other runners and I was like, we don't see it, but if you do, that's great. I was like, okay. I was like, all right. There's one point I could have sworn I saw a tennis court, like an actual tennis court and people playing on it in cars. And I was like, I'm going to go get them. They're going to save us. This was in the midst of probably the worst storm, which I can talk about. But I was like, they're going to help us, guys. They're going to help us because we met up with my pacer. We ran into a couple other runners and they're like, nothing's there. Like, nothing is there. I was like, what? But yeah, so the worst storm was probably the fourth night. And it was then also considered, there's two really technical climbs. And this was the second one. And you're already going from some mile 170 to 200. And so that technical climb was more around like 185 to 200. So you're already pretty tired, right? And we already had just survived like a bunch of storms and, you're already sleep deprived. And we walked out of the aid station and everything you couldn't see anything in front of you. So the rain, the fog, you couldn't see anything. And I was like, well, this can't last, right? Like it can't be this bad for this long. Well, it was. And it was through the whole night until we got to the next aid station. That was 15 miles, but it would take an hour to go 1 mile because you couldn't see the flags. I couldn't even see my pacer. Trees were falling. Hail was coming down. There was lightning. And and you're going up and down and you're sliding everywhere because the mud is it's so slick and it's really thick. And so we had great like equipment on us, but everything you got completely drenched, completely drenched. And, we had to have emergency stuff packed with us. So I had my emergency bivy, which is like this emergency blanket. I remember wrapping that around me. There were some runners who passed me and had an extra one, gave me some, but you're running out of food at that point too, because this is taking forever. And, at that point, a good amount of people, I think, had dropped out. I think your top people didn't experience that, right? Because they had already finished. And so there was a certain portion of the runners who were experiencing this. I happened to experience it on the mountains. Some of it may have experienced, between 200 and 240, but the people who experienced it won't ever forget it. And I think that those were the moments where, I never wanted that 15-mile section to define the race, but it was probably the most scared I've ever been in my life. It was probably the closest I ever thought that I would come to dying. And I think it's hard to say that now, even out loud, especially as a mom. I thought a lot about my kids. I prayed a ton in those moments. I had a great pacer. He was as positive as could be. I mean, we really couldn't do anything. There was no way you would even get rescued because they had to come here. You only could truly move forward. And I think that was, you have a lot of thoughts that go through your head at that point and you're really holding on. You think hypothermia because you're very, very cold. And you're like, how can I survive being this cold? Because it was just freezing temperatures as well. And you had 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gust. And like I said, you throw in the hail and the visibility and the mud and the lightning. I mean, animals were like crying. We were like, I think it was elk were like mewling, like
That's
really loud.
Crazy.
Yeah. And we got there, like we did it. Right. And we made it to that 200-mile mark. And I remember just embracing my crew and my pacer and I was full of tears, but it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have time to process. Like you don't, no one did. Like you have to maybe get a quick nap, some food, retape your feet, because then again, the feet got destroyed even more, and just go. So, I think now have I processed a little bit of it after, but that was just a really, really scary kind of experience through the midst of it all. And I think that, there's been a lot of posted on it. Some of the runners have posted on it and they've done a really great job capturing it. Some have captured it on film, but it was that storm was pretty scary
Yeah,
to be part of. Yeah.
it sounds like going through literal hell.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it sounds like Armageddon going through actual hell to get to the other
Yeah.
side.
So you lay
Yeah.
down for a 30-minute nap, and like, does somebody wake you up, and like, how do you get up and just say like, I'm going to keep doing, I'm going to keep doing this?
Right. Well, at that point too, like, because I was able, once I got to the aid station, to do a quick, like 30, 40-minute nap, which was great. Uh, but, you know, there's only 40 miles left. So that's also
Right.
where it's like, I'm not going to go have gone
Right.
through all of those storms in this
Yeah,
night
yeah.
and then not finish this thing. So, I think then I have the next 20 and I'm pretty tired. So I am taking probably multiple, they call it dirt naps, which my pacer would just time me like 5 minutes. But I was really, really tired. And it wasn't until probably a mile out from the final aid station. I think there was, can't remember exactly, about 18 miles left after we got there. I felt like that mile out took forever to get to that aid station. I was like running out of water. I was like, I'm not moving. You got to go tell me where the aid station is and I'll wait here. And she's like, I'm not going to leave you. And it's just because you get so exhausted and tired. And we got to that aid station, we refueled. But I remember my feet, I didn't realize how bad they were because they kept retaping them. But they were in so much pain. Like even me getting up from that aid station to just get myself like adjusted again. It goes back to almost the broken foot that you mentioned about David Goggins. Like you got to just move on it because if you stop on it, it's like you just freeze all over again. It just hurts. It's like you just have to go on it. And, we can get to the part two about the finish, kind of, it wasn't really until a mile out or 2 miles out that I knew I was going to finish maybe, which is when you think about this, like a whole 240-mile race and not to like really know you're going to finish until those final two.
What do you mean by that?
'Cause I
If you
didn't-
said you knew you weren't going to finish, you knew you were going to quit.
Yeah, I knew I wasn't going to quit, right? So it's like, even though I'd get to that finish line, but making the time, right? Like making that cutoff time. And I think this is where, the Candace, she's the race director, said this was like the most epic finish apparently ever of Moab. And I said, okay. And now as people had started reaching out to me, I'm starting to understand why. But I had 15 minutes to spare from the cutoff. And I think I didn't realize just how slow I was kind of moving through those final 18. But I knew the minute it became light out and I saw that road, because we were going through the mountains still. So it was like super rocky. So that feeling on your feet, like they were pretty cut open, just hurt. But the minute I saw that road, I knew the minute I got there, I would run a 7-minute mile if I had to. I haven't run a 7-minute mile in like forever, but it's like,
Really?
I am finishing this thing.
So you don't consider
Yeah.
yourself a fast runner? You just never stop.
Well, I think back in the day it was a little faster, but not now. And for these you don't. Like for these you really don't. You're in like zone 2 most of the time.
Yeah.
It's really about hours on your feet versus speed. So I think it was about 4 miles once we hit the pavement and we just ran. And what was the neatest part was, throughout this whole race, I always said, even when I first got into the lottery, every single day, and I wish I kind of recorded it, but every single day there was something that confirmed I had to do this race. Whether it was something someone said to me on a train, whether it was the parking attendant when I was going into the trails to train and just telling him the story and him getting super inspired, whether it was reading a book and something said Moab in it. There were signs without a doubt every single day that no matter what happened, no matter the outcome, I was meant to do this race. And I think that was true even during the race. And whether it was truly me that saw the Virgin Mary, right? Like whatever you believe in, like maybe I needed to see that, right?
Yeah.
But I think there were angels at the aid stations, and there were a couple points with the Pacers, and we talk about that team that really got me back on track in a lot of different ways. I see them as angels throughout this whole thing, and I see other people. We had other people you would meet up with. We call it leapfrogging. So you would see them. Maybe you'd see them at mile 60, and then you saw them again at mile 140, and then you pass them and you would see them again. And that's kind of the concept of these races. But even they were angels. But I remember there was one pivotal point after that storm and I was just so shaken up. I was drenched. I was shaken up. There was 4 miles to get to that 200-mile mark. And, Nick was a pacer out of the blue, and he goes, you know what, we're going to get you there super fast, because if we get you there fast and you stay with us, like my pacers and my runners, you're going to have time to eat and do that 30-minute nap. And I did. I just kept up. And you sometimes wonder where you pull these things from, especially at like a 200-mile mark. Like, where was this within me? So coming up then, so you get to the 4 miles to the finish, and it's now at this point, it is actually kind of beautiful out, and you're running, and I'm just putting my head down, because I really I don't have any concept of really where we are at this point. I'm pretty out of it, but I'm very focused, like on getting to that finish line. And I turn the corner and I start hearing a lot of cheers. Then I see this Nick come down. He's like, I knew you were going to do it. I knew it. I go, what's going on, Nick? And he's like, turn the corner. And he goes, everyone's been waiting for you. I didn't realize like what a story this was, where people ended up just watching me. So I think as they were watching me, they're like, hey, we have this runner, Christine. She's coming down. She's probably going to miss the cutoff, but please all stay to cheer her on, because they were kind of starting this like post-race party thing. And they're like, wait a minute. So I found this all out after, but they're like, wait a minute. She's moving. And she's like, whoa, she's going fast. She's going to do this. Wait, she just did this time on this mile. She's coming. So they rallied everyone around, and they did this like there's like a video on it too. I think there was YouTube live, so people were watching. My boss said like the whole company like shut down to watch this, but they all put their arms up, like in a T like this. And then I would run through it, but I didn't know that. So Nick's like, you got to see what they did. So I turned the corner, and it's just this line of like runners and pacers and crew and supporters. And I run through it to the finish.
That is
I'm
why
so
I just got
amped
the
up
chills.
right now.
That's
Yeah.
so intense. It's gotta be
Let's
like
go
a
for a
movie.
run.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
unreal. And you finished with how many minutes to spare from the cutoff?
15.
That's unbelievable. How long did they give you to
5
do it?
days.
It was exactly 117 hours.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, you had 117. So I just finished a little less than that. And, then you come out, and I really couldn't walk, right? Because you truly give it all. And they call it, this is a big deal in the ultra community. And I didn't know that till after this race, but they call it, I'm going to swear for a second, but DFL, dead fucking last. And that's what I was. And it's apparently a big deal because it's like the longest sufferer. It's the longest person who was out there, the one who had the most like grit, like just being out there for that long. And, I truly gave my all. So it just was, yeah, it was neat. Those like people. So after I crossed, people were like coming up, getting pictures with me.
That's so
And
cool.
even the race director, Candace, she was like, how did you do this in the last 5 miles? We've never seen this. This is the most, like I said, epic finish we've ever seen in Moab, like the excitement you created. And I was like, what? Because I'm so out of it. But now looking back on it, I can kind of see some of it, but they were taking tons of pictures. I think the race, they did a standalone post of just me.
That's so cool.
Again, like it took me days to kind of like unravel all that, right? But
as we kind of wrap up, like I'm just curious, like what, and I'm sure you're still unpacking a lot of the emotions and a lot of the thoughts around it. But like, are there any like one or two things that you took away from it that you're, that either are sort of impacting your day to day as a mom or as an executive? Like one or two things that you really think like it maybe surprised you after the race was over?
I think there is still this, I think there's things that are reinforced, right? And I am still unpacking it, but I think there is, something about, we call it mom guilt, but there's also something about being an example of grit for our kids and what that means. I think really embracing that. I think there are times where, we talk about balance and, you can have people who look at this life and like, how did you do all this? And were you truly present here or there? We could ask anyone those things in life with the choices we make. But I think there is something that I even see with the kids and strength that they have, that they just the past month seeing their mom do something like this, that I don't know if it was Moab that gave that to them. I'd like to think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think it would continue to. And I also think there's, with my team at work, from a leadership perspective, there is this calmness too when you have focus. And there is really something about putting processes, systems in place too, and really making clear decisions that, and confidence in those decisions when, you don't have sometimes all the answers or you're not fully always there, and a calmness about that too, that really can inspire a team, get them moving mountains, literally speaking, right, in the right direction strategically, and bringing something out even in the team, right, that they didn't even know they had. And so I've seen that, whether it was through the training and even post. And those are some of the things that I'm excited to continue to utilize and see.
Cool. Ev, did you have a question before I interrupted you?
I mean, maybe it's similar, but like, do you feel different now that you're on the other side of Moab?
I do actually. Yeah. And I think I really started feeling it a little bit, that change about a month before, like just this peace and this confidence. Cause like I said, like that training got really lonely. It was a slog. You do question like, what am I actually doing here? Like you like dig deep almost during the like training. But I do. And I think I'm continuing to realize it. And it's been really fun to see just the inspiration it can kind of bring out of people too, and just how people inspire me throughout it all.
You're an inspiration for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And as we kind of wrap up, like, is there, for the listening audience, is there anything that you would want them to leave with, or any particular piece of advice, or like, maybe it's not Moab 240, but maybe it's something different, like any piece of advice you'd want to give to the listening audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is this piece of just take the next step. I think we all come to this point, like maybe for me, it was the mile 185 to 200. That was really tough, right? Like in my life, but we all have things, right? You don't have to do a 240-mile race sometimes to experience different things or hardships or difficult decisions or challenges, but it is all about taking that next step, whether it's the next mile, the next step, and finding those little micro wins.
Mm.
And I think that is, don't look at the whole thing, right? Like, don't look at the whole thing. I didn't approach that race looking at 240 miles. I approached it looking at aid station, and I had to then break it down to getting to a tree
Yeah.
to just get those micro wins. But I think that's the biggest thing, is just take the next step. We all face things, right? We're all going through things. But that next step, that next mile, as cliche as that sometimes can sound, you have it within you to do it. And so it's move forward.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep
Well,
moving.
listen, I think I'd have to look back because we've had a lot of episodes, but I think this is probably like top 2 or 3 for me. No doubt. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
So Christine, thanks so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. You truly are an inspiration, and we appreciate you coming on to share more about your experience and your journey and kind of all the takeaways. So way to go, and we're super proud of you over here.
Thank you. It's so fun to be on. Thank you for letting me share it.
Absolutely. Well, to you, the listening audience, get out there and run. But besides that, make sure you click subscribe below to be notified when we release our next episode. I really appreciate you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving.